All right, now we're official. All right, everybody, welcome to today's National Heritage Area Best Practices Call. My name is Heather Fieser. I'm so glad that you are joining us today. We are going to be talking to two different national heritage areas today, Ohio and Erie Canalway, and Lackawanna Heritage Valley National Heritage Area, about the idea of making things more accessible. So about access and accessibility in national heritage areas. And we're going to start with Mira from Ohio and Erie Canalway National Heritage Area. And she is going to talk about her river rally that they have and kind of talk about how they created more access for people in Ohio to access the canal. So Mira, let's pull up your PowerPoint and see if it worked as well as it did in the test.
Right. That's always the
trick.
Let me make sure I find the right window to share. That would be the other trick.
Just hit the share screen. There you go. I can see it. You're good.
Excellent. Excellent. And if I start to get a little bit jerky, just flag me down and I'll turn my camera off. So thank you everybody for joining today. I see some folks that I recognize, and I see some folks that are from heritage areas that focus exclusively on rivers. So my name is Mira Cardenas. I'm the executive director for Canalway Partners. We're based in Cleveland, and we are co-administrators of the Ohio and Erie Canalway National Heritage Area. And a little bit of orientation just about our heritage area. We interpret, share, and protect the first 110 miles of what was a 300-mile canal. So you see the boundary here. Cleveland and Akron are really the two centers of the most activity. And then there in the middle, you can see Cuyahoga Valley National Park. It's also important to think about the ways that we encourage people to travel across the heritage area. So we have a hike, bike, towpath trail that follows most of the historic canal path. We have a scenic railroad. We have America's Scenic Byway, National Byway, and then we have the Cuyahoga River. And our mission at my nonprofit at Canalway is to connect people to place for the prosperity of all. So some of our newer programming is reflecting that, like, what does for the prosperity of all mean, and how do we connect people to place? And maybe we do it through ways that are not as traditional. So we're trying to challenge the ways that we think about connecting people to place. So as Heather mentioned, we created a new event a couple years ago to strengthen the connections on and along the Cuyahoga River. And this program specifically focuses in Cleveland. So you can see how the towpath trail at some points comes along what is an industrial river. And I'll talk a little bit about why we created this specific event in a minute. So a little bit of orientation about the Cuyahoga River. It is 100 miles, but the distance between the origin and where it reaches Lake Erie is only about 30 miles. So it is certainly the crooked river. The part that falls within the National Heritage Area is the purple part, the blue part, the orange part, and part of the green part. So this is a relatively new state water trail, and it's incredibly diverse across the entire heritage area and across the entire river corridor. So this is what we might traditionally think of either as a river rally or what we might find on a water trail. But the reality in Cleveland is much different. If you're in a kayak or you're a recreational user, you are sharing a very narrow, very twisty river with very, very big boats. So one of the largest skyscrapers in Cleveland, if you laid it on its side, that's the length of one of these freighters. So they're incredibly intimidating. But this industry is the backbone of Cleveland's economic industry. It's a $3.5 billion annual benefit. But we're now starting to look at how do we all share this resource. The other reality that you face in Cleveland is, yes, the river burned 50 years ago. And I'm not going to show you a picture of it because that's not where we are today. But that is the underlying reality that you deal with among the community and among the country is, oh, that's where the river burned. So a much maligned river, it was once incredibly polluted, that it wasn't blue or green. It was kind of the Cleveland Browns rust color. And so last week, though, the culminating event to celebrate the 50 years of the Clean Water Act was here in Cleveland. And this is Mayor Stokes, who was one of the forces behind creating the Clean Water Act. So, you know, those images live on in not only individuals' minds, but in an entire community's minds. And that collective memory is really hard to get past sometimes, even if it's no longer the actual reality. So what you can, see here is a sense of how narrow the river is, a sense of how you can have a barrier to actually access the river. It's actually down in a valley. So this is taken from land. This is not taken from the sky. So you can, and you can see the variety of uses from industrial to residential to recreation. So in 2018, the city of Cleveland began a planning process to create a cohesive riverfront experience for people, recognizing that it's not a great experience for people along the riverfront. And they wanted to honor recreation, commerce, and livability. So there was a tremendous public outreach across the entire community, and they went 5 to 10 miles outside off the river to find out what the community was talking about. And so these were a couple of the comments that inspired me when looking at what the community had to say. And that is, they wanted more programming to create a reason to come down to the river. But a lot of people also felt so disconnected from the river because this was something that you drive over, you go around, or you might not even incidentally interact with the river. So, whoops, went wrong way. So with that, the concept of the River Rally was born. So we were looking at smaller scale, but high impact programming. And we wanted to program this particular piece of land, which the Canalway owns. It's only about a 2-acre site right along the river, but it was not utilized really at all for events. So it's named for a poet called Hart Crane. And this sculpture there reflects the curviness of the river, but also reflects some of his poetry alongside the river. And it's just a nice pocket park. And especially during the pandemic, we realized that we had more control if we were programming a space that we actually owned. So our overarching theme for creating this event was to celebrate the progress of the Cuyahoga River and the recreational and lifestyle enhancements that clean water provides. Notice there's nothing about a river on fire in our overarching goals. So we created programming around different ways to get people to the river. And so you can see this is from our 2021 kickoff event, and there were walking tours, biking tours. And then if you did get on the water, you didn't necessarily have to have a kayak. And I helped load people on the holiday boat during that time. And I had so many people say to me, I've lived in Cleveland all my life, I've never been on the river. And so that really helped to validate that connection that we were making with people that they didn't have that connection to the river. So these are some of the event activities that we had in 2021, which was our first kickoff year. So most of these tours were not conducted by me or my staff. We reached out to programming partners, and they provided bike tours to river cleanups that were conducted, that were from a kayak, but you could also rent a kayak, so you didn't have to have one to participate. We had 2 walking tours, 2 kayak tours, again with event rentals, and then 3 bike tours. So we had about 480 spots available to sign up for tours. All tours were 100% free. The only fee you might have incurred is if you were going to rent a kayak. And coming up in 23 programming, we're going to remove that and make kayak rentals available to folks. So, so all events were free, 480 spots reserved. We also had 16 partners engaged in the overall project. And 8 of these partners were folks that we hadn't worked with before on a project. So it was deepening our own connections in the community as well. So it was so successful, and we really liked that picture, that we used it again, but that we decided to do it again in 22. And so this is a little bit of like what our programming looked like in 2022. We did add 2 new programs, which was an urban birding walk. And then we partnered with the Dragon Boat Association, and they offered dragon boat paddles with people. So these didn't have to, so you were going out in a safer way on the river if you weren't actually familiar with the river. So really very little, you can see the dragon boat in the lower right. So in some ways, very little of our programming is really on the water independently in a kayak. More of it was either facilitated or was connecting you from the land to the water. And so what we saw as a result was tremendous outreach with new audiences, with family groups, with, as I mentioned, new partners. So this year on the lower left, you'll see we added, this is a part of Cleveland Metro Parks. They went fishing in the in the river that day, caught these fish, and then offered a petting zoo for fish for kids. And then they put them back in the river at the end of the day. So we saw people with a variety of mobility. So if you feel like you're either too old or too young to go out in a kayak by yourself, we offered opportunities for you to get out on the river. And the most important thing to us was to get people to the river, to start to build that connection and that ethic with people by getting them to the river. And then they could choose what they felt most comfortable participating in. So we saw a huge uptick on this year. We really think we had closer to 1,100 people, but we wanted to be really, really conservative with how many people were there on site. We had over 600 people pre-register. Again, it was still free, but you can see over 4,000 people looked at our webpage to check out the material. They might not have made it out that day, but they were connecting with it that way. And social media impressions is, I'm quite sure what this means, but that's a really big number. I like to look at the engagements a little bit more. But so we have doubled our attendance over just the course of 1 year. And like I mentioned, we were reaching audiences that we as an organization weren't reaching prior to this. So we're going to do it again next year. And, we're just looking forward to finding new ways to celebrate the Cuyahoga. And that's my overview of our Cuyahoga River Rally.
Thanks, Mira, so much. I'm gonna hold questions till the end, until we hear from our next heritage area. Owen, are you on?
Yes, I'm here. I'm here actually with Joe Corcoran and Justin Topa from LHVA. So all three of us are sitting around our conference table.
Okay, I see you. All right, give me a second. Now, do you guys have a presentation, or are you just gonna
Yeah.
chat?
I'm going to share my screen if that's okay.
That's great.
Okay. Okay. Is it working? Can I share it?
Yes,
All right.
I can see it.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Again, my name is Owen Worsbit. I'm the Director of Operations here at Lackawanna Heritage Valley. I'm joined by Joe Corcoran, who's our Executive Director, and then Justin Topa, who's our Community Engagement Coordinator. And one of the projects that I'm going to be talking to you about today is something we refer internally to as the Lackawanna Avenue Connector. So for those of you that are not familiar with where Lackawanna Heritage Valley National Heritage Area is, we are located in Northeast Pennsylvania. The heritage area is primarily designated as the Lackawanna River watershed. So we encompass parts of 4 counties in Northeast Pennsylvania, Lackawanna, Luzerne, Wayne, and Susquehanna. One of the main projects that we continue to work on over the years is building out our Lackawanna River Heritage Trail. The Heritage Trail is, when it's all said and done, part of a larger trail system that'll run 40 miles from the entire length of the Lackawanna River. And one of the main focuses of the heritage area is reconnecting people to the Lackawanna River. We just heard about the Cuyahoga Valley, which is very famously known for its river problems. The Lackawanna River was not in much better shape. It was basically an open sewer and used as a wash for all of the coal mining operations that took place in Northeast Pennsylvania. So there was nothing living in the river, nothing anywhere on the riverbanks. So it was just a dead river. And one of the things that over the years has changed is now the Lackawanna River in certain parts is designated as Class A wild trout stream. So we have people coming to Northeast Pennsylvania to fish this river that 50 years ago, nobody would want to even go near because of how bad it smelled. And now it's great to see the amount of people coming to visit, not only to participate in outdoor recreation, but then to also stay and spend money here in downtown Scranton. So the Heritage Trail being one of the main focuses of the heritage area, we were identifying certain areas where we were having problems with accessibility and connectivity. So the Heritage Trail, I'm going to zoom in here a little bit more, and then I'll pull up my PowerPoint just to give you a better idea of where we're at. The green that you see, my cursor following, runs right through the middle of the part of the city, right next to Steamtown National Historic Site. The Lackawanna Heritage Valley offices are located directly across the river from the Steamtown. But then you have all of downtown Scranton. So with the trail, prior to us doing this, what we call Lackawanna Avenue Connector, there was no ADA access from the trail into downtown. So there would be people who live in here with a stroller or perhaps a wheelchair user. They had no way to get to the trail. So we were looking at ways that we could fix that problem. So we were able to, we were very fortunate to work with the city on an infrastructure project that we refer to as the Lackawanna Avenue Connector. So you can see a little bit more information about kind of what I was talking about there, but the connection to not only downtown, but to Steamtown and the County Trolley Museum was really something that we wanted to focus on, so that people who are staying in downtown, whether they live in downtown Scranton or they're staying at one of the area hotels, we wanted to make sure that we would make it easily accessible for them to be able to use the trail in their stay or while they live here. You can see here's a larger view of the entire trail network. It's probably too much for you to really be able to break down, but we really wanted to focus on this piece here in downtown Scranton. So just another map there. I kind of went through a couple of different ones there. Just this is it from a different angle here. So sorry, bear with me. Again, we have Steamtown National Historic Site, the county's intermodal center, where a lot of the bus routes to New York City, to Philadelphia and beyond, they depart from the county intermodal center. The orange line down below is the Heritage Trail, and then our headquarters are located right up here. So this A line is what we refer to as the Lackawanna Avenue Downtown Connector. Previously, there was a sidewalk path that was not more than 18 inches wide. So you'd have people, whether they're riding their bike or walking the stroller or in a wheelchair, they'd be in line with traffic when it's not a wide enough span. So the chance for an incident to occur was very high. We were fortunate that when we were working with the city, they were all on board with what we were proposing to do, because we were really alleviating a big problem that they had. The bridge that this goes under is known commonly here as Bridge 60. It's part of the County Rail Authority lines, as well as Steamtown National Historic Site. So there's like 4 active tracks on top of the railroad bridge, and there was no way to really fix this problem without doing something like what we decided we were going to undertake. So in 2020, we started construction. It took about 8 months for us to really wrap up the whole project, but now we have a safe ADA accessible trail connection that will help people get into downtown Scranton from the main part of the trail. Where I have my cursor here off to the right-hand side is the main part of the trail. And annually, we have between 150 and 170,000 trail visits on this section of trail. The connector just opening, we haven't really done any numbers on the connector yet, but it is frequently used by people going to and from downtown to Scranton High School and other places that they previously would have barriers that in their way that they wouldn't be able to get there. So just a real quick breakdown here. As far as the timeline goes, we conducted a feasibility study where we hired an engineering firm to find out the best possible options on how we wanted to go about doing this connection project. We were able to secure design funding, and we brought an engineer on board in 2018. And then we began construction in August 2020. I was delayed a couple months because of COVID, and then finally construction wrapped up in 2021. And as far as the overall feedback from people who are using it, it's very, very positive. We were able to get, we were lucky that we were able to work with some adjacent landowners. Part of where we ended up building some of the wall is on the U-Haul property. And U-Haul saw us as a good neighbor and a good partner. So they were willing to give us an easement to do the project that we needed to do. And overall, now that this project is completed, the city of Scranton has tried to identify other barriers and other opportunities of how to connect the Heritage Trail into some of the other neighborhoods. So that's being done through the city. LHVA is participating in that, but primarily looking at different barriers and different reasons why people couldn't get to the trail for one reason or another. So again, as we started off, Lackawanna Heritage Valley is not. We are not just focused on the trail. Obviously, we are interested in working with the economic impact that the trail creates for downtown Scranton, and also one of the programs that we've been opening up through the benefit of our local healthcare foundations is we've been working with advocates on the use of hand cycles and recumbent bicycles. So at LHVA's main office here, we have a number of hand cycles and recumbent bicycles, which are meant for people who have whether they are wheelchair bound or they have some other balance problem where they have trouble able to ride a regular bike. So we do have those available at our office here, and opened up a whole new avenue for people to get out and utilize the trail and overall improve health and wellness for the entire region. So that's kind of just an aside on some additional accessibility things. But I believe that's the end of my presentation now. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. But if anybody has any questions, we're more than happy to answer them.
All right, thank you. That was wonderful. All right. So as Owen is done sharing his screen, we will open it up for questions from either Mira or anyone at Lackawanna Valley, because I know there's a couple people at the table. So does anybody have any questions? I have a question, so I guess I can go first. But then if you have a question, if you raise your hand, that'll be great, so we can make sure that you can access. Mira, my question is for you. So you've had successful events. Have you noticed that, like, not specifically when you're having an event, but have you noticed that there's been more interest in getting on the water in the Cleveland area, or have groups seen more interest in kayaking? Or, I mean, it might be too early to tell, but I feel like your event's doing well. So has that translated into more people feeling more comfortable?
Yeah, so I think what's important is it's like one part of a big effort across the city to do a lot of different things. So part of that study, Vision for the Valley, that I was referencing is that, they're looking at a common river walk across around in downtown. There are other nodes to create access to the river. So this is just one part of a much bigger picture to get people connected to what they really, there are really two waterfront initiatives going on in Cleveland. So one is to connect downtown to Lake Erie, and then also to better develop the spaces along the river. Like, there are still some industrial uses that have, they've vacated now. So the land is open and ripe for redevelopment. So how can we redevelop it smarter? So that was part of it. I think we are, and there are a lot of organizations along the river. There are rowing organizations. There are organizations that focus on kayaking, but one that we work a lot with, Trash Fish, who is a river cleanup organization. And he's busy constantly. So I think you're also seeing an influx into downtown residents. Over 20,000 people now live in downtown Cleveland. And so people are closer to the river now. So does it have an effect? I think all of these kind of build on each other and do have an effect.
Okay, thank you. Katie has a question.
Hi, Mira. Well, full disclosure, I rode on the Cuyahoga River when I was in college. So I was at one of those clubs. But my question is, do you have issues with people actually making that connection in an unsafe way from the river to the lake? Because I'm from Buffalo, New York, and that's something on the Buffalo River. When we rented kayaks, they tried to make it really clear not to go into the lake. And they said that's a big problem the Coast Guard is running into, maybe also with the Niagara River down the way. It's just too strong.
Yeah. So even though you can practically see the mouth of the river from where we start, because it's so twisty, I mean, we're right where the rowing foundation would where those docks still are. And so you are like about a mile as the river goes to the mouth of the river. So it's really just too far from where we put in for people to make it to the lake, especially. And this is not, the kayaking part of it is not for new people on the river. We encourage them to do the dragon boats. If they go out on a tour, they are with an experienced guide and, like 2 sweeps. So very few people are actually going out on their own.
Okay.
It's not a river for beginners.
Yeah, that's what I was just wondering, because that was a big warning. They tried to make it very clear.
Yeah. So the idea is, so if you get connected to the river and then you start to build your experience, and that might not be through us or through our event, but we've gotten you there, and maybe your next step is, oh, I really liked this. I want to learn more. So I'm going to go over here right next door to the Rowing Foundation, and I'm going to find out how I can get involved with them. Or, you have the kayak vendor there. Oh, okay. I'm going to take more tours with them. and less about getting people out on their own. It's more about getting them a connection to the river.
Okay, so Owen and or whoever at Lackawanna, here's the next question. It's for you, and it's in the comments. It says the ADA trail that was redeveloped went under an active rail line. Was there any issue with the railroad, or did you have enough access without the railroad's involvement?
In order to do the project, we had to file a PUC order with the Pennsylvania Utility Commission. And then we had to work with the railroad. One of the pictures that I should have showed, we had one of the only conditions that the railroad made us comply with was we had to hang netting above where the trail goes to catch any falling debris that may either come off the tracks or from the bridge structure itself. So we did end up having to install netting over the entire bay that we go under. And then we were able to fulfill the PUC order with that.
Bridge is about 100 years old.
And the bridge itself is probably 120 years old, 110 years old. So there are a lot of concrete that is not necessarily structural, it's more decorative, but we've had issues with the pieces of it falling off. And thankfully, we haven't had any issues with it under this trail now.
Okay, and I have a follow-up question for you. So you're at the end, you said you guys were looking at other additional acts, like maybe not you, but maybe the city was looking at additional access points. Are they going to be kind of like what you guys did and making it ADA accessible? Is that the plan?
Yes, there are certain areas where you have barriers between neighborhoods and the trail and the river. And they're looking at those corridors and what they can do to make them more walkable, more bikeable. But they're identifying that. We took this one under our wing because it was something very important to us to get access to downtown and to the historic sites and whatnot. As far as the additional connections, that's more focused on the city itself.
We also put lights on it that wasn't with before.
Thank you. Oh, Liz has a question. Liz? Yep. You have to unmute, Liz.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Heather. One comment for Lackawanna and then a question for Mira. So this kind of gets to what you just said, Heather, but I think with Lackawanna's, it's really interesting to see how they saw a problem, their proposed solution, working with people to provide that solution, and then actually being a catalyst for other people then to be wanting to be part of the solution too. So I commend you in being able to be that catalyst for that community. And then the question for Mira is, you mentioned that you won't be charging rental costs for kayaks in the future. So did that come from a new partnership you found, like a sponsorship from a new partner? Or is that from the kayak company saying, oh, well, we'll just like give you 50 that we wouldn't charge you for? How did that kind of come about?
Yeah, so what this event has also done is either increased or brought us new sponsors to help support the event. So I expect that this year our baseline costs that we've had, the event overall was, so we do have live music, so we pay the bands. We do pay some of our vendors, not vendors, but some of our tour guides for coming out. And we do contract with a special events coordinator to kind of pull this all together. So, and then this year we added beer, which also adds to the cost. So the event itself is about a $10,000 event. And we have sponsorships that are covering almost 100% of that now. So we're hoping with new sponsorships, we'll be able to cover the kayak rentals. The kayak company that we use is actually further downriver or upriver, I guess, further south, but upriver. And they just love the event. And so while the kayak fees are like, $35, but they don't charge us for their time. They don't charge us for the transport. They also will go out and act as a guide. So that's part of it too, that they see the importance, because, you know, it's good business for them because they're getting access to potentially new clients to rent kayaks from them in the future. So that's really how that's developed. This was very easy to convince a couple of our current sponsors to transfer some of their money from another event to this event. So then that just started to grow. So this year we're starting to get some new money in on it. Actually, last year we did too. But.
Thanks. Yeah, I don't know if this was mentioned before, but I will say that these two projects were highlighted on their annual data reports that were submitted to Washington. And, you know, it's really looking, you know, my point is, you know, those don't just come and then aren't really like considered or looked at. And so it's really trying to see how are there themes that you guys are working on in terms of projects or programs, how can they be highlighted, how can this be shared among yourselves or with others in the Park Service. So I just wanted to point that out too, that a lot of some of these ideas that come from those annual data collection forums to see kind of what cool stuff's out there and what can we share more of. So thank you both for providing this as kind of information and what you're doing and seeing how those kind of can connect across heritage areas about these types of projects.
Okay, thanks, Liz. Are there other questions? We still have time. Okay. Then if there are no additional questions, we will wrap up our call. Thank you everybody for tuning in. Oh, Katie has something.
I just want to share, we're moving next month's call to November 17th because of Thanksgiving. And we will be discussing partnering with Native American tribes and hear from Jennifer Talkin-Spalding about new policies and ways the Park Service is prioritizing Native American partnerships and co-creating narratives and new kind of administrative priorities and documents that have come up recently. So Jennifer will be presenting from a Park Service standpoint, a new policy and guidance, and then we'll have heritage areas sharing about ways that they've partnered on management plans and other partnerships in their heritage areas. So yes, thank you both to Owen and Mira for presenting and for Liz for highlighting these great successes in your annual data collection.
Yes. So thank you everybody for tuning in for today's call and have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye.